My father looked me in the eyes and said, "You're trash, Violet, trash I should have thrown away when you were born." Meanwhile, he was having a blatant affair with our neighbor, who laughed in my face every time I passed by her house. "Good afternoon, my dears. My name is Violet Marks Collins, but everyone calls me Miss Violet. I'm 82 years old and was born in a small town in rural Georgia called Millbrook, where everybody knows everybody since the beginning of time. Today, I'm sharing a story I've kept in my heart for over 60 years, a pain I've carried since childhood that only now, in my old age, have I found the courage to share. My childhood wasn't like other children's. I was born in 1942, at a time when families were large and fathers were respected without question. My father, Oscar Marks, was known in town as a hard-working man, the owner of a small repair shop for wagons and later bicycles. From the outside, we looked like a normal family: hard-working father, homemaker mother, 3 children. Me, my brother Joaquin, 2 years older, and my younger sister Rose, 3 years younger. But appearances can be deceiving, my dears. Inside our home, reality was very different. From a young age, I noticed my father treated me differently from my siblings. With Joaquin, he was proud, saying he was a real man who would follow in his footsteps at the shop. With Rose, he had infinite patience, called her princess, always with that little smile on his face. With me, it was just coldness, criticism, and words that cut deeper than any knife. "Violet, are you really this stupid, or do you do it on purpose?" That was one of his favorite phrases whenever I struggled with something. If I dropped a glass, if I got a math problem wrong, if I tripped running in the yard, anything would trigger that look of contempt and one of those cruel remarks. My mother, Zelia, was a faded woman, the kind who lives in her husband's shadow, thin, always tired, always with that sad gaze lost on the horizon. She saw everything my father did to me, heard all the cruel words, but never said anything. Sometimes I'd run to her crying after being humiliated, and she would hug me in silence, but she never defended me in front of him. "Your father works very hard, Violet," she would whisper when I asked why he was so mean to me. "He's always tired. You need to try not to irritate him." How could I not irritate him? My very existence seemed to irritate my father. The way I walked was wrong. "You walk like a lame duck," he would say. The way I talked was wrong. "Lower your voice, girl. Your voice is irritating." The way I ate was wrong. "Eat properly. You look like an animal." When I turned 7 and started school, things got worse. I was a bright girl. I liked reading, doing math, learning new things. But when I came home excited to tell them I got a good grade, that the teacher had praised me, my father always found a way to ruin my joy. "A good grade? Let me see this good grade," he would say, taking my notebook with that suspicious look. Even when the grade was truly good, he found fault. "See this ugly handwriting? Looks like chicken scratch. And this mistake here? How do you make such a simple error?" Let me know in the comments what city you're watching this old lady's memories from. Also tell me how many grandchildren you have. And if you can, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You don't know how it warms my heart to know my stories are reaching you. I was 8 when I discovered the first terrible secret of my family. It was a Saturday morning. I remember it like it was yesterday. My father had gone to the shop, as he always did, even on weekends. My mother was in the backyard hanging laundry, and I was playing on the living room floor when I heard a strange sound coming from my parents' bedroom. It was soft crying, a sob my mother was trying to muffle. I went to her and found her sitting on the bed holding a paper in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong, Mama?" I asked, worried. She quickly wiped her eyes and hid the paper. "It's nothing, my child. Mama was just thinking about sad things." But I had seen the paper before she hid it. It was a letter, and even as a child, I could read some words. It mentioned meetings, missing each other, when your husband isn't home. And it was signed, "Your Barbara." Barbara was our neighbor across the street. A beautiful woman, about 10 years younger than my mother, always well-dressed, always with that provocative smile. She was married to Anthony, an older man who traveled a lot for work. When he wasn't around, she would stay alone in that big house, always finding excuses to come talk to my father in his shop. Gradually, I began to understand what was happening. My father wasn't working all those Saturdays and Sundays. He was going to Barbara's house, and my mother knew everything. The worst part was that Barbara seemed to take pleasure in humiliating my mother. When they met on the street, at the market, at church, Barbara always made a point of commenting about my father. "Your Oscar is such a hard-working man," she would say with that fake smile, "always in the shop, always dedicated to his work. You're lucky to have such a dedicated husband." And my mother would lower her head, murmur, "Yes, indeed," almost inaudibly, and walk away as quickly as possible. With me, Barbara was even worse. When I passed in front of her house, alone or with my siblings, she made a point of appearing at the window or at the gate to throw those looks of contempt at me. Sometimes, when my father was nearby, she would make malicious comments about me, knowing he would agree. "This girl is getting weirder and weirder," she would say, looking me up and down. "She doesn't even look like your daughter, Oscar. So different from the others." And my father would laugh. Agree. Take the opportunity to throw in another of his poisonous phrases. "That's true, Barbara. This one took after her mother's bad relatives. There's no hope for her." Imagine, all of you, a child of 8 or 9 hearing this. Imagine what these words do to a girl who already felt rejected by her own father. I started to believe there really was something wrong with me, that I was ugly, stupid, weird, a mistake of nature. At school, I became withdrawn. I had few friends, always stayed in the corners, always afraid of saying something wrong and confirming what my father said about me. The other girls played, laughed, ran around the yard. I sat under a tree, watching, wishing I had the courage to approach them. When I got home, the routine of humiliation continued. If I got a good grade, it was because the teacher felt sorry for me. If I got a bad grade, it was because I was just stupid. If I helped my mother with housework, I was getting in the way more than helping. If I didn't help, I was lazy and useless. "Look at this girl," he would say to my mother, as if I wasn't there. 8 years old and still doesn't even know how to sweep properly. How can a child be so incompetent? My siblings watched all of this. Joaquin, being the male child and the favorite, never got scolded. Sometimes he even laughed when my father humiliated me, trying to please him. Rose was too young to understand, but even so, she received completely different treatment from me. What hurt the most wasn't just my father's words, but my mother's silence. Seeing her there washing dishes, sewing, cooking, as if nothing was happening while I was being emotionally destroyed just a few feet away from her. Sometimes our eyes would meet during one of these humiliation sessions, and I saw in her eyes a deep sadness, but also a resignation that left me even more desperate. She was suffering as much as I was, maybe even more, betrayed by her husband, publicly humiliated by a shameless neighbor, and on top of that, watching her daughter being mistreated every day. But she had no strength to react, to defend us, to change our situation. One night, when I was 9, I woke up to the sound of an argument in my parents' bedroom. It was rare for them to fight loudly. Usually my father simply imposed his will, and that was that. But that night, my mother was crying and saying something about how this situation couldn't continue. "Oscar, this isn't right," I heard her say, her voice choked with emotion. "Violet doesn't deserve to be treated like this. She's our daughter, our daughter." He laughed mockingly. "That girl has been a burden on my life since she was born. Always crying, always getting in the way, always giving me trouble. If it were up to me, I would have sent her to live with some relative long ago." "How can you talk like that? She's a child." "A problem child. You can see how different she is from the others, always sulking, always with that pitiful face. She must have turned out like your brothers, a bunch of failures." I heard my mother cry louder, and then silence. I went back to my bed with a broken heart, finally understanding that there was no hope for change. My father didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as a burden, a mistake, something that should be discarded. It was around this time that I started having nightmares. I dreamed that I was lost in a big city, looking for a family that would truly want me. I dreamed that my father kicked me out of the house and I was wandering the streets, begging for food, sleeping in the open. I would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, and stare at the dark ceiling of my little room, wondering if life would always be like this. During the day, I tried to be invisible, spoke as little as possible, moved through the house like a ghost, always trying to anticipate my father's mood to avoid his explosions. But it was useless. He always found some reason to humiliate me, to remind me how unwanted I was in that house. And Barbara continued to circle around our lives like an evil shadow, always with that venomous smile, always making a point of showing that she knew everything, that she had power over my father, that she could destroy our family whenever she wanted. My mother was withering away each day, getting thinner, sadder, more resigned to a life that had become a prison of humiliation and betrayal. This was the environment where I grew up, my dears. A house where love was distributed unequally, where the child who needed affection the most received only cruelty, where family secrets poisoned every meal, every conversation, every moment of supposed tranquility. And the worst part is that I didn't yet know that this was just the beginning of my journey through hell. The following years would be an escalation of suffering that seemed to have no end. When I turned 10, in 1952, my father's humiliations became even more elaborate, more cruel, as if he had discovered that words could hurt more than any beating. It was a Monday morning when something happened that I'll never forget. I was getting ready for school, combing my curly hair in front of the broken mirror in my room, when my father appeared at the door with that face of someone ready for the daily attack. "Look at this girl trying to get ready," he said with that malicious laugh. "You can spend all day in front of that mirror and it won't make any difference. Born ugly, die ugly." I stopped combing my hair, my hands trembling. He didn't stop there. "Do you know why God made you this way, Violet? To teach the world that not everyone is born to be somebody. Some people are born just to serve as an example of what not to be." Joaquin was passing in the hallway and heard everything. Instead of defending me, he started laughing. "It's true, Dad. Violet looks like a scarecrow." My father was proud of his son's participation. "See? Even your younger brother understands. Everyone can see it, except you who deludes yourself thinking you'll be something in life." I ran to school with eyes full of tears, but what hurt the most wasn't my father's cruel words. It was knowing that my own brother had joined him in humiliating me. The family that should protect me was becoming my greatest source of pain. At school, things weren't much better. My father's words echoed in my head during classes. When Miss Dorothy asked something, and I knew the answer, I remained silent, afraid of saying something stupid and confirming that I was indeed dumb. When I didn't know, I felt even worse, as if it were confirmation of everything my father said about me. The other girls formed groups, played together at recess, exchanged secrets. I was always left out, not because they rejected me, but because I isolated myself. How could I make friends if I didn't believe I had any value? One day, the most popular girl in the class, Mary Jane, tried to include me in a game of Ring Around the Rosie. "Come on, Violet, come play with us." But I shook my head and stayed in my little corner under the tree. "No, thank you. I don't know how to play properly." "What do you mean you don't know how?" "Just hold hands and spin." "I'm kind of clumsy." "You'll laugh at me," Mary Jane insisted, but I continued to refuse. After that day, she stopped inviting me. Not out of meanness, but because children don't insist much when someone doesn't want to participate. And I became even more alone, confirming to myself that I really wasn't fit to have friends. At home, the situation with Barbara was becoming increasingly blatant. My father didn't even bother to hide the affair anymore. Sometimes she would show up at our shop in the middle of the afternoon when everyone was home and stay there talking to him for hours. My mother watched everything from the kitchen window but said nothing. "Oscar, aren't you ashamed?" I once heard my mother whisper when she thought no one was listening. "The whole town is talking." "Talking about what?" he responded aggressively. "I talk to whoever I want. If you don't like it, that's your problem." "But in front of the children, Oscar, the children will get used to the reality of life, especially that one," he said, pointing at me. "The sooner she learns that life isn't a fairy tale, the better." Barbara made a point of provoking me whenever she could. When I passed by the street and she was at the gate, she always had a venomous comment. "Hi, Violet," she would say with that fake smile. "How are you? Getting more interesting every day." The word interesting came out of her mouth as if it were an insult, and I knew it was. Once she was talking with other neighbors in front of the house when I passed by returning from school. I couldn't help but overhear what she was saying. Poor Zelia, she spoke loudly, wanting me to hear. With a hard-working husband like Oscar and a daughter. Well, not every mother is lucky with all her children, right? The other women laughed softly, and I felt my face burn with shame. I ran home and locked myself in my room, crying until I had no more tears. My mother was getting thinner and more faded every day. Sometimes I found her standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing, with that lost expression on her face. When I asked if she was okay, she always gave the same answer. Yes, my child, Mama is just tired. But I knew it wasn't just tiredness. It was a deep sadness, a resignation that was consuming her from within. My father's affair with Barbara was a secret that everyone knew, except those who pretended not to know. In 1953, when I turned 11, things got even worse. My body started to change, as happens with all girls that age. But for my father, this was just another opportunity to humiliate me. Look at that, he said one day when I was helping my mother hang clothes on the line. The girl is becoming a young lady and stays ugly just the same. God really doesn't perform miracles. Joaquin, who was now 13 and thought he was the greatest, laughed at his father's joke. Dad, you're so funny. Not funny at all, my father continued. I'm serious. In a few years, we'll have to find a husband for this one, and it won't be easy. Who would want a woman like that? Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. At 11, I was beginning to have those dreams that every girl has, of one day finding someone who would love me, of starting a family, of being happy. But my father was telling me that I couldn't even have that. Oscar, stop it, my mother finally said. You're hurting the girl. Hurting? I'm preparing her for reality. Better she knows early on that her place is to stay home, taking care of you in your old age, because she won't get a decent man. That night, I cried into my pillow until I fell asleep. It wasn't just the cruelty of my father's words that hurt me. It was the realization that he was trying to destroy all my dreams, all my hopes for a better future. At school, I began to obsessively compare myself with the other girls. Mary Jane had straight, shiny hair. Anna Paula had beautiful blue eyes. Carrie had a pretty smile and a cheerful personality. And I could only see flaws when I looked in the mirror. Miss Dorothy noticed that something was wrong with me. One day after class, she called me for a talk. Violet, you're one of the brightest girls in the class, she said, with that sweet voice that reminded me of what it would be like to have a mother who defended me. But you've been very quiet, very sad. Is something happening at home? I remained silent, not knowing what to answer. How could I explain to her that my own father called me ugly and stupid every day? How could I tell her that he had a mistress who kept humiliating me? How could I say that my mother was withering away with sadness? No, Miss Dorothy, everything is fine. Are you sure? You know you can trust me, right? I wanted to trust her, wanted to open up, cry on her shoulder, ask for help, but I was afraid. Afraid that she wouldn't believe me, afraid that she would think I was exaggerating, afraid that she would tell my parents and make the situation even worse. I'm sure. I'm just kind of shy. She looked at me with those eyes full of kindness and understanding. Okay, Violet, but remember that if you need to talk, I'm here. I left school that day with a heavy heart. Miss Dorothy had shown me a little bit of what it was like to be treated with affection, with respect, and that only made it hurt more when I got home and found the cruel reality waiting for me. In 1954, Barbara got pregnant. The whole town started gossiping because her husband had been traveling for more than 4 months. Everyone knew whose baby it was, but no one spoke openly about it. My mother was devastated. It was as if my father's betrayal had taken physical form, living proof that she had been replaced. She started crying every day, sometimes in the middle of simple activities, like cooking or washing clothes. Mama, why are you crying? I asked one day, finding her wiping her eyes while peeling potatoes. It's nothing, my child. Mama is just thinking about life. But I knew it was because of Barbara's growing belly, which she proudly displayed around town, always passing slowly in front of our house, always with that provocative smile. My father, in turn, seemed more distant from us than ever. He came home late, ate in silence, went to bed early. Sometimes I caught him looking at the house across the street with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it desire, pride, or fear of the consequences of his actions? With me, he continued to be as cruel as ever. If anything, it was worse, as if all the attention from the situation with Barbara was being taken out on me. "You'll grow up to be just like your mother," he said one night, out of nowhere while we were having dinner. "A bitter, dull woman that nobody wants around." My mother lowered her head, but I saw a tear fall onto her plate. It was the first time my father had directly included her in the humiliations he usually reserved just for me. "Oscar," she whispered. "What?" "It's true. Look at you. Look at this girl. 2 useless women in my house." Joaquin and Rose ate in silence, embarrassed. Even they, who were used to my father's cruelties, were shocked by such meanness. That night, I heard my mother crying in her room until dawn. It was a soft cry, muffled in the pillow, but it broke my heart. I wanted to go there, to hug her, to tell her that we would both be okay, but I didn't have the courage. I was afraid that my father would wake up and become even more furious. Barbara's baby was born in March 1955. It was a boy, and the whole town knew it was my father's son. Her husband returned from his trip, pretended to believe the child was his, but a few days later he left for good, leaving Barbara alone with the child. This should have been a scandal that destroyed her reputation and my father's, but it wasn't. Barbara was smart. She knew how to manipulate the situation. She started playing the victim, the abandoned mother, the woman who had been deceived by a married man. "Poor Barbara," I heard the neighbors commenting. "Deceived by that shameless Oscar, and his wife still puts up with it." It was unbelievable how she managed to turn the situation around. Instead of being seen as the homewrecker she became the victim of the story. And my father continued to be respected in town, as if nothing had happened. But at home, the tension was unbearable. My mother barely spoke, barely ate, seemed like a ghost wandering through the rooms. My father was constantly irritated, as if we were the ones to blame for the problems he himself had created. And I was turning into a teenager full of complexes, insecurities, and fears. I firmly believed that I was ugly, stupid, and useless. I had no friends, didn't participate in anything at school, lived like a shadow. At 13, in 1955, I started having anxiety attacks. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, in a cold sweat, with the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. During the day, sometimes I would suddenly find it hard to breathe, as if the world was collapsing on me. My mother noticed that something was wrong, but she didn't know how to help me. She herself was struggling to survive emotionally. "Violet, you've been very nervous," she said one day. "Would you like me to make you some chamomile tea?" It was all she could offer. A cup of chamomile tea. She had no money for a doctor, no knowledge about psychological problems, no strength to confront my father and demand that he stop mistreating me. It was during this time, at the end of 1955, that something inside me began to change. It wasn't yet the courage to rebel. That would come much later. It was just a small spark of revolt, a silent questioning about whether this life was really all I deserved. I would look at the sky sometimes and think, "God, if you exist, why did you put me in this family? Why do I have to go through this?" They weren't rebellious questions. They were desperate inquiries from a girl who didn't understand why the world was so cruel to her. And it was with this questioning in my heart, with this deep pain in my soul, that I entered adolescence. The phase of life that should be one of discovery and joy, but for me would be just a continuation of the nightmare that had already lasted 13 long years. In 1958, when I turned 16, my life took a completely unexpected turn. I was in the 10th grade, one of the few girls my age who was still in school, since most families took their daughters out of school to help at home or to arrange marriages. My father only let me continue studying because, according to him, at least this way, she stays occupied and doesn't get in the way at home. It was that year that the history teacher, Mrs. Connie, assigned us a group project about the American Civil War. I always preferred to do assignments alone. I was terrified of working in groups because I thought others would realize how stupid and useless I was, as my father always said. But this time, there was no choice. Mrs. Connie formed the groups on the spot randomly, and that's how I found myself sitting at a desk next to Andrew Santos, a boy who had arrived in town a few months earlier with his family from Charleston. Andrew was different from all the boys I knew. He was 17, tall, wore glasses, and had a calm way of speaking that put me at ease. When the teacher announced that we were in the same group, along with 2 other girls, Celeste and Irene, I was mortified. Great, I thought to myself. Now he's going to discover how stupid I am and tell everyone. But Andrew was kind from the first moment. When we met to discuss the project, he asked me what I thought about the topic, which part I would like to research. It wasn't a forced, polite question. He seemed genuinely interested in my opinion. I don't know, I stuttered, looking down. You can choose. I'll do any part, but you must have some preference, he insisted, smiling. How about the part about regional movements? You seem to like reading. I always see you with a book under your arm. I was surprised. Someone had noticed that I liked to read. Someone had paid attention to me without criticizing. Yes, I do like to read, I admitted timidly. I think I can research the regional movements. Great, said Andrew with genuine enthusiasm. I'm sure you'll do an excellent job. Those words, I'm sure you'll do an excellent job, echoed in my head for the rest of the day. It had been so long since someone had shown confidence in me that I couldn't even remember what that feeling was like. We spent the following weeks meeting at the school library to work on the project. And it was during these meetings that I began to discover what it was like to talk to someone who treated me like a normal human being. Andrew asked me questions about my life, about what I liked to do, about my dreams. At first, I was paralyzed by these questions. Dreams? What dreams? My father had convinced me that I was good for nothing, that my destiny was to take care of him and my mother in their old age. But Andrew was persistent, in a gentle way. Gradually, I opened up. I told him that I liked to read, that sometimes I wrote small texts in my notebook, that I dreamed of visiting big cities like Atlanta. You write? He asked, his eyes shining with interest. What kind of texts? Silly things, I quickly replied, afraid that he would want to read them. Things without importance. I doubt they're silly. I bet you write very well. It was amazing how Andrew could see good things in me that I didn't even know existed. When I said an idea about the project, he praised my reasoning. When I suggested a different approach, he said I was creative. For the first time in my life, someone was making me feel intelligent. The project was completed and was very well evaluated by the teacher. Mrs. Connie especially praised my part about regional movements, saying it was very well researched and clearly written. I felt a pride I had never felt before. After the presentation, Andrew found me in the schoolyard. Violet, you were incredible in the presentation. You spoke with such confidence, showed so much knowledge. Why do you underestimate yourself so much? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? You always talk about yourself as if you were, I don't know, as if you weren't good enough. But it's obvious that you're very intelligent, very capable. I felt my eyes fill with tears. It's that my father always says that. I stopped mid-sentence. I couldn't tell Andrew about the humiliations I suffered at home. He would think I was making it up, or worse, he would agree with my father. That your father always says what? Andrew asked gently. Nothing. It's not important. But he realized that it was important indeed. In the following days, Andrew started paying more attention to my behavior. He noticed how I would shrink when someone spoke louder, how I always apologized for things that weren't my fault, how I seemed scared when I made the smallest mistake. One afternoon after class, he invited me to have a soda at the school cafeteria. I hesitated. My father didn't like me wasting time after school. He said I had to return home to help my mother. Just for a moment, Andrew insisted. I want to talk to you about something. I accepted with my heart racing. What did he want to talk about? Had he discovered some flaw in me? Was he tired of my company? We sat at a small table in the corner of the cafeteria, and Andrew looked me in the eyes with a seriousness that made me nervous. Violet, can I ask you a personal question? I nodded without being able to speak. What's your family like? Are your parents affectionate with you? The question hit me like lightning. For a moment, I thought about lying, about saying that my family was normal, that my parents loved me. But there was something in Andrew's look, an understanding, a kindness, that made me want to tell the truth. "No," I whispered, looking at the table. "Not much? Your father, does he treat you badly?" The tears started flowing before I could even answer. Andrew reached out and held my hand, a simple gesture that made me feel more welcomed than I had felt in years. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," he said, "but I want you to know that you don't deserve to be mistreated. You are a wonderful person, Violet. Anyone who can't see that is the one with the problem." And at that moment, something inside me broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. For the first time in my life, someone was telling me that the problem wasn't with me, that I wasn't ugly, stupid, or useless, that I had value. I started telling Andrew about the humiliations I suffered at home. At first, in small pieces, afraid that he would leave, that he would realize that my own father didn't love me and conclude that there really was something wrong with me. But Andrew didn't leave. He came closer. With each story I told, I saw the indignation grow in his eyes. "This isn't normal, Violet," he said after I told him about my father calling me trash in front of Barbara. "No father should speak to his daughter like that. This isn't discipline. It's cruelty. But if he speaks like that, it must be because it's true," I murmured, still trapped in the psychological chains my father had built around me. "No." Andrew spoke louder, drawing the attention of other people in the cafeteria. He lowered his voice and continued, "None of it is true. He's wrong, completely wrong." It was the first time someone had clearly told me that my father was wrong, that his cruel words weren't truths about me, but reflections of his own problems. Andrew began to invite me to study together more frequently. He always found excuses: a math assignment, a geography research project, an English essay. And I always accepted, hungry for those moments of respect and affection. It was during these meetings that he patiently deconstructed years of psychological abuse. When I said I was stupid, he showed me how my ideas were intelligent. When I said I was ugly, he told me about how my eyes sparkled when I smiled. When I said I was good for nothing, he listed all the things I did well. "You have a unique way of seeing things," he said one afternoon, as we were reviewing an essay I had written. "Your writing is poetic, full of sensitivity. How can your father say you're good for nothing?" Gradually, I began to believe his words more than my father's. It was a slow, painful process, like pulling out thorns that had been embedded for years. But it was liberating. At home, things remained difficult. My father noticed that I was arriving a little later from school and quickly found a reason to complain. "Now this girl wants to act important," he said during dinner. "Wasting time at school instead of coming to help your mother." "I was studying, Dad," I replied, surprising everyone, including myself, by daring to give an explanation. "Studying?" He laughed scornfully. "For what? Do you think you're going to be a doctor, a teacher? Wake up to reality, girl. A woman like you is only good for getting married and taking care of the house. And that's if you can find a husband." His words still hurt, but not as much as before. I had Andrew's voice echoing in my head, reminding me that I had value, that I was intelligent, that I deserved respect. "Maybe I will be a teacher," I said with a courage I didn't know I had. The silence at the table was total. My father looked at me as if I had committed a crime. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "I said that maybe I can be a teacher. My grades are good. Miss Connie said that—" "Miss Connie doesn't know you like I know you," he cut me off. "She doesn't know how lazy you are at home, how stubborn you are, how I'm intelligent," I completed, interrupting him for the first time in my life. My father was so shocked that for a few seconds he couldn't speak. Joaquin and Rose looked at me with their mouths open. My mother had stopped eating and was staring at me with a mixture of admiration and terror. You are disrespecting me," my father stuttered, not believing that I had dared to defend myself. "No, Dad. I'm just telling the truth about myself. The scolding I got that night was terrible." My father yelled for hours about how I was getting sassy, full of myself, forgetting my place. But for the first time, his words couldn't completely break me. I had a new voice in my head, Andrew's voice, reminding me that I had the right to defend myself. The next day, I told Andrew what had happened. I expected him to be worried, to tell me not to provoke my father anymore. But he smiled proudly. "You defended yourself," he said, his eyes shining. "You're finally beginning to see your own worth." But he got furious, yelled at me all night. "And did you feel worse after speaking the truth?" I thought for a moment. No, I felt different, as if I had recovered a little piece of myself. "Exactly, Violet. You're beginning to free yourself." It was December 1958 when Andrew asked me a question that changed everything. "Violet, would you like to be my girlfriend?" I was speechless. Be his girlfriend? Me, whom my own father said no man would want? Me, who had spent 16 years believing I was ugly and worthless. "Are you sure?" I stuttered. "I am," he replied, holding my hands. "You're the most special person I've ever met. You're intelligent, sensitive, brave." Brave? Me? Of course. Imagine the courage it takes to survive so much abuse and still be a good, generous person, capable of smiling. I accepted Andrew's proposal with a heart full of fear and hope. Fear that he would discover that my father was right about me. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could be truly loved. And that's how, at 16, I experienced for the first time what it was like to be treated with love, respect, and affection. Andrew showed me a world where I didn't have to apologize for existing, where my opinions had value, where I was seen as a person worthy of love. But I still didn't know that this new love would be tested in the cruelest way possible. My father was about to discover our relationship, and his reaction would be more violent than I could ever imagine. If you're really paying attention to my life journey, thank you very much. For those who are truly here, comment below. I am here, Violet. I'll be very grateful to know that someone is here with me. I also want to ask you to like this video. After liking, you'll see a button that says Boost. Click on it to help this video reach more brave women who need to hear this story. Thank you very much. The year 1959 began with a happiness I had never felt before. Andrew and I had been dating for a few weeks, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly loved. He would pick me up after school. We would walk together through the streets of Millbrook, talking about books, dreams, and plans for the future. During the first few months, we managed to keep our relationship a secret. Andrew understood that my family was complicated and respected my request to take things slowly. We would meet in the library, in the church square after Mass, always in public places where no one could say anything wrong. It was Andrew who taught me that I had the right to dream. Sitting on a bench in the square one February afternoon, he asked me what I wanted to do with my life. "I don't know," I answered automatically. "I've never thought about it." "What do you mean you've never thought about it? Everyone has dreams. My father always said that a woman like me is only good for taking care of the house and her parents in their old age." Andrew was indignant. "Violet, you can be whatever you want. You can study, you can work, you can travel the world if that's what you want." These conversations planted a seed in my head. I secretly began to dream of being a teacher, of having my own classroom, of teaching children to read and write. It was a small dream for some people, but for me, it seemed impossible and wonderful at the same time. Andrew encouraged me in everything. When I showed him my writings, he always had something positive to say. "You should publish this," he would say. "You have real talent for writing. Publish where? I'm just a small-town girl. It doesn't matter where you were born, talent is talent." Because of my conversations with Andrew, I began to behave differently at home. It wasn't rebellion. It was self-esteem. I stopped apologizing for everything. I began to express my opinions when asked. I stopped accepting my father's humiliations without questioning. My father noticed the change and didn't like it at all. "This girl is getting sassy," he said to my mother one night in March. "She must be learning these things at school. I'm thinking of taking her out of school." "Oscar, she's in her final year of high school," my mother protested timidly. "It would be a shame to stop now." "Shame? Nothing. Girls don't need much education anyway, and this one is getting too full of herself." I was terrified by the possibility of stopping my education. Not only because I liked learning, but because it would mean not seeing Andrew every day. Our relationship was my only refuge, my only source of joy. It was in May 1959 that everything changed. Andrew had given me a small bracelet as a gift for my 17th birthday. It was a simple thing, silver-plated with a heart-shaped charm. To me, it was the most precious object in the world. I wore the bracelet hidden under my sleeve, but on a hot Saturday afternoon, while helping my mother wash clothes in the backyard, I rolled up my sleeves and forgot I was wearing it. Barbara, who always found excuses to appear when my father was nearby, came to our house to borrow a cup of sugar. She saw the bracelet on my wrist, and her face lit up with that malicious smile I knew so well. "What a pretty bracelet, Violet," she said, loud enough for my father to hear from the shop. "A gift from someone special?" My blood froze. I quickly pulled down my sleeve, but it was too late. "What bracelet?" My father appeared at the back door, curious. "Violet is wearing a very pretty bracelet," Barbara said with false innocence. "Looks expensive. I wonder where it came from." My father approached and extended his hand. "Show me that bracelet." There was no way to escape. With trembling hands, I showed the bracelet to him. "Where did this come from?" His voice was dangerously calm. I got it as a gift." "From whom?" I remained silent. I didn't know what to answer. "I'm asking who gave you this bracelet," he shouted. Barbara watched the scene with that satisfied smile of someone who was enjoying the suffering of others. From a classmate at school?" I lied. "Classmate? What kind of classmate gives expensive gifts to a girl?" "It's not expensive, Dad. It's a simple thing." "Simple?" He snatched the bracelet from my wrist with such force that it hurt me. "This is silver. Do you think I'm an idiot?" I started to cry. "Dad, please." "Are you dating?" he declared as if he had discovered a terrible crime. "You're dating secretly. That's why you have these ideas in your head." "Oscar, she's a young woman," my mother tried to intervene. "It's normal." "Normal? A 17-year-old girl dating secretly, receiving gifts from a man? That's what loose women do." The comparison hit me like a slap in the face. "I'm not a loose woman. I'm just dating." "Oh, so you admit you're dating. And with whom?" I didn't answer. "I'm asking who you're dating." "With Andrew Santos," I whispered. Barbara laughed. "Ah, the new boy who arrived from Charleston. How interesting. Oscar's daughter got herself a boyfriend from the city." My father became even more furious with her comment. "Rich boy. Yeah, he must be having fun with you, right? Because city boys don't marry small-town girls. He's using you, and you're too stupid to realize it." "That's not true. Andrew respects me." "Respects?" He laughed cruelly. "A man who respects asks for the girl's hand from her father. He doesn't give gifts in secret. He's preparing you for other things, you naive girl." "Oscar, don't talk to the girl like that," my mother protested, but he completely ignored her. "From today on, you don't talk to that boy anymore," he decreed. "I don't want to even see you near him." "Dad, you can't do that. I like him." "You don't like anything. You're too young to know what liking is and too stupid to know when you're being deceived." I ran to my room crying with a broken heart. It wasn't just the prohibition that hurt me. It was knowing that my father had transformed something pure and beautiful into something dirty and shameful. The next day at school, I told Andrew everything. He was indignant at my father's words. "He can't forbid you to date," said Andrew. "You're 17, you're almost finishing high school. But he's my father, and if he finds out I continued seeing you, it'll be even worse. Violet, what your father is doing isn't protection, it's control. He wants to keep you trapped, dependent, without self-esteem." Andrew was right. But I was very afraid. I knew my father. I knew what he was capable of when he got really furious. We decided to meet secretly only at school, but my father, with Barbara's help, soon found out. She began to watch me, always finding excuses to be on the street when I left the house, always keeping an eye on who I talked to. A week after the discovery of the bracelet, Barbara went running to tell my father that she had seen me talking to Andrew at the school gate. "That disobedient daughter of yours is continuing to talk to the boy," she said, as if she were doing a great favor. I saw them talking quite animatedly this morning. When I got home that afternoon, my father was waiting for me in the living room with the most terrible face I had ever seen. "You disobeyed me," he said without beating around the bush. "Dad, You just disobeyed me. I told you not to talk to that boy anymore, and you continued talking to him. We only talked at school. There's nothing wrong with that." "Yes, there is. There's everything wrong with it. A decent girl doesn't keep talking to a boy after her father has forbidden it. It was then that he said something that froze my blood. "Starting tomorrow, you're not going to school anymore." "No!" I shouted. "Dad, I'm only a month away from finishing high school. You should have thought of that before disobeying me." My mother tried to intercede. "Oscar, for God's sake, let the girl finish her studies." "I'm not letting her do anything. She proved that she can't be trusted. She'll stay home helping you until she learns to behave." I ran to my room desperate. I couldn't accept that my father would destroy my future because of his machismo and cruelty. I decided that I had to warn Andrew about what was happening. The next morning, while my father was in the shop, I snuck out and went to the school. I found Andrew during the break and told him everything. "He can't do that. You're 1 month away from graduating?" He was indignant. "Yes, he can. I'm a minor. He has authority over me." "Violet, this is abuse. Your father is punishing you for having normal feelings for a girl your age." "What do I do, Andrew? If I keep disobeying, he'll get even worse." Andrew thought for a moment. "I'll talk to him." "No," I panicked. "Don't do that. He'll be furious. Someone needs to show him that my intentions are serious, that I respect you." "Andrew, you don't know my father. He's capable of—" But Andrew had already decided. "I'll go to your house this afternoon. I'll talk to him man to man." I spent the rest of the day terrified. I knew my father. I knew he wouldn't listen to Andrew politely. He would humiliate him. He would humiliate me. He would turn this into an even worse situation. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Andrew showed up at our house. He was dressed in his best clothes, hair combed, respectful posture. He knocked on the front door and asked to speak with my father. I was spying from my bedroom window when I saw my father coming out of the shop to attend to Andrew. Until then, there was still a chance that everything would go well. Andrew was polite, intelligent, knew how to talk. But Barbara, as always, appeared at the exact moment to ruin everything. She was sweeping the yard of her house when she saw Andrew at our door and came to interfere. "Hi, Oscar," she said with that provocative tone. "Important visitor?" My father turned to her with irritation. "It's Violet's so-called boyfriend." "Ah, how interesting. The young man came to ask for her hand." Andrew tried to maintain his politeness. "I came to talk to Mr. Marks about my relationship with Violet." "Relationship?" My father laughed scornfully. "What relationship? You think talking secretly with my daughter is a relationship? Sir, I have the best intentions with your daughter. I came here precisely to—" "To what? To deceive me like she tried to deceive me?" Barbara was loving the show. "Oscar, the boy seems polite. Maybe—" "You have nothing to do with this," my father exploded at her, but then turned to Andrew with even more anger. "And you think you can come here to my house after influencing my daughter against me?" "I never influenced Violet against anyone," Andrew responded firmly but respectfully. "No? Then why was she obedient before meeting you and now she's sassy? Maybe because she's discovering that she has value, that she deserves to be treated with respect." That was the last straw. My father turned red with anger. "How dare you tell me how to treat my daughter? Who do you think you are?" "I'm someone who loves Violet and wants to see her happy." "Love?" My father laughed cruelly. "A 17-year-old boy doesn't know what love is. You just want to take advantage of her." "That's not true." "No? Then why didn't you ask for my permission before dating her? Why was everything done in secret?" Andrew hesitated. "Why? Because Violet said you were difficult to talk to." "Difficult? Or did she know that I would discover your true intentions?" The discussion was escalating terribly. My father was completely losing control, shouting worse and worse accusations. Barbara watched everything with that satisfied smile. "Mr. Marks," Andrew tried once more. "I came here in peace, wanting to do things right. I like Violet very much and would like to continue dating her with your permission." "Permission?" My father exploded. "You think I'm going to give permission for some random boy to date my daughter? You're not good enough for her." "How can you say that without knowing me?" "I know your type. City boy who comes to the small town to take advantage of naive girls. My daughter won't be your entertainment." Andrew was getting red with indignation. "You're being unfair to me and to Violet." "Unfair? What's unfair is you influencing a girl against her own father. What's unfair is you putting ideas in her head." "What ideas?" "The idea that she's intelligent, that she has value, That she deserves to be treated with kindness? Those ideas exactly. You filled her head with fantasies. Now she thinks she's too good to obey her father. Barbara, seeing that the situation was getting ugly, tried to sneak away, but my father called her. Barbara, you who know the whole town, have you heard about this boy's family? She stopped, clearly enjoying the situation. Well, I heard they're different people, city folks, right? They have more liberal customs. See? My father turned to Andrew. Even the neighbors know that you're not serious people. Andrew completely lost his patience. You're being prejudiced. You don't know my family, you don't know me, but you've already decided that we're bad people. I know what I need to know, and I know that you're not going to get close to my daughter again. Violet is 17. She can decide for herself. As long as she lives in my house, I'm the one who decides. And my decision is that you disappear from here and never come back. She won't stay in your house forever. One day, she'll grow up and see how unfair you are to her. That's when my father completely lost control. You disrespectful boy. How dare you speak to me like that? Get off my property before I call the police. Andrew, seeing that there was no more possibility for dialogue, turned to leave, but before he shouted loud enough for me to hear from my room, "Violet, don't give up on dreaming. You're worth much more than he makes you believe." And he left, leaving my father in a fury that I had never seen before. War had been declared, and I was in the middle of the battlefield, about to discover how far my father's cruelty could go. After the argument with Andrew, my father entered the house like a hurricane. I was in my room trembling when I heard his heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. The door opened with such force that it hit the wall. "Come down to the living room," he shouted. "Now!" I went down with shaky legs. My mother was in the kitchen. Joaquin and Rose were in the living room, all in silence, feeling the tension in the air. "Sit there," he pointed to a chair. "We're going to talk." I sat, trying to look small, invisible, as I always did when he was furious. But this time would be different. "First, you're not going to school anymore. It's over. I don't even want to hear any discussion about it. Dad, I'm 1 month away from graduating." I said I don't want to hear any discussion. "Second, if I find out that you talk to that boy, even if it's just to say good morning, you'll see what's good for you. Third, you're going to work at Mrs. Eulalia's house, sewing. She needs an assistant, and you need to learn that life isn't a game." Mrs. Eulalia was a lady known in town for exploiting the girls who worked for her. She paid very little and demanded that they work from dawn to dusk. "Dad, I can work after I finish school." "You don't understand yet?" He approached, his face red with anger. "You don't have the right to give opinions about anything anymore. You lost that right when you decided to disobey me." It was at that moment that something inside me broke. Maybe it was Andrew's words echoing in my head. Maybe it was the desperation of seeing my dreams being destroyed. Maybe it was simply the limit of what a person can endure. "I do have the right to give opinions about my own life," I said, surprising everyone, including myself, by daring to say it. The silence in the room was total. My father looked at me as if I had spoken in a strange language. "What did you say?" "I said that I have the right to give opinions about my life. I'm 17. I'm not a child anymore." Joaquin and Rose looked at me with their mouths open. My mother appeared at the kitchen door, pale with shock. "Have you gone crazy?" my father stuttered, not believing my audacity. "No, Dad, I'm beginning to see things as they really are." "And how are they, Miss Know-it-all?" I took a deep breath. It was now or never. "You're not protecting me. You're destroying me. You're trying to turn me into a person without dreams, without hope, like—" I stopped before saying, "like Mom." But everyone understood. My father turned purple with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? I raised you. I put food in your mouth, clothes on your back. And you also spent 17 years telling me that I was good for nothing, that I was ugly, stupid, and useless. Because it's true." "No, it's not true," I shouted, standing up from the chair. "I'm none of those things. I'm intelligent. I get good grades. I write well. I have dreams." "Dreams?" He laughed cruelly. "What dreams? Becoming a teacher, marrying that city boy? Wake up to reality, girl. My dreams are valid, and Andrew respects me, values me, makes me feel like a person of worth." "Oh, really? And I, who am your father, don't do that?" "No," I exploded. You've never made me feel anything but shame and sadness." That's when he raised his hand to hit me, but for the first time in my life, I held his wrist. "No," I said, looking into his eyes. "Enough. You're not going to hit me anymore." He was so shocked that for a few seconds he didn't react. You're confronting me?" "I'm defending myself." "There's a difference." My mother approached nervously. "Violet, don't provoke your father." "No, Mom. I'm tired of not provoking. I'm tired of staying quiet while he humiliates me. I'm tired of silently accepting all kinds of cruelty." My father managed to free his arm and backed away as if I were dangerous. "You're possessed. That boy filled your head with demons." "Andrew filled me with something that you never gave me. Self-esteem." "Self-esteem?" He spat the word as if it were a curse. "That's nonsense from city people. Self-esteem is knowing that I deserve to be treated with respect. It's knowing that I have the right to dream. It's knowing that I'm not the trash that you always said I was." "Yes, you are. You're trash. You're useless. You're—" "Stop!" I shouted so loudly that even the neighbors must have heard. "Stop saying these things. I am none of that." It was then that I decided to throw in his face the card I had been holding for years. "You want to talk about morals? You want to give me lessons about behavior? Then let's talk about you." My father tensed. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that a man who cheats on his own wife with the neighbor has no moral ground to judge anyone." The silence in the room was deafening. Joaquin and Rose looked at me with wide eyes. My mother started crying softly. "Violet," my father whispered, the color draining from his face. "Yes, Dad. I know about your affair with Barbara. I've known for years. I know that her son is yours. I know that you humiliate my mother every day with this blatant betrayal." "How dare you?" "How dare I what?" "Tell the truth that the whole town knows, except those who pretend not to know." My father was visibly shaken, but he tried to react. "This is none of your business." "Yes, it is my business, because you use my mother as a doormat and use me as a punching bag to take out your guilt. You know nothing about life. I know more than you imagine. I know that a real father doesn't call his own daughter trash. I know that a real husband doesn't cheat on his sick wife. I know that a real man doesn't need to humiliate women to feel important." At that moment, my mother stopped crying and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was pride. For the first time in her life, someone was speaking for her, defending her. "Violet, stop this," my father tried, but his voice no longer had that authority from before. "I won't stop. I'm tired of pretending I don't see. I'm tired of pretending our family is normal. You're a hypocrite. I am your father. A father is someone who loves, who protects, who encourages. You've only given me suffering." It was then that I released everything that had been stuck in my throat for years. "You demand perfection from me, but what kind of example are you? What moral ground does a man have to call his own daughter a tramp when he himself spends nights in another woman's bed, cheating on his sick wife who is sitting right here?" I pointed to my mother, who was crying, but now with her eyes shining with a different emotion. "You want me to be a decent girl? Then be a decent father, be a decent husband. Set the example instead of just demanding." My father was pale, trembling with anger or shock. I couldn't tell. "And you know what, Dad? I'm not going to work at Mrs. Eulalia's house. I'm going to finish my studies, even if I have to study on my own. I am going to become a teacher. I am going to marry Andrew, and I am going to have a happy life, despite everything you've done to destroy me." "You're not going to do any of that," he shouted, trying to regain his authority. "As long as you live in my house, then I won't live in your house anymore." I cut him off, surprising even myself. Everyone was shocked. Even I was scared by my own courage. "What?" my father stuttered. "You heard right. I'm leaving. I'm going to live with my Aunt Connie in Eastville. She always said her doors were open to me. My Aunt Connie was my mother's sister and always showed affection for me. She lived in Eastville with her husband and 2 children, and whenever she visited us, she would comment on how intelligent I was and what a shame it was that I didn't have better opportunities." "You're not going anywhere," my father shouted, but his voice sounded more desperate than authoritative. "Yes, I am. I'm 17. I can choose who to live with." My mother stood up from her chair. "Violet is right," she said with a voice I hadn't heard in years. She can choose. My father turned to her in disbelief. Zelia, are you taking her side? I'm on the side of truth, my mother responded more firmly than I had ever seen her. Our daughter is right in everything she said. I shouldn't have let things get to this point. You've gone crazy too? No, Oscar. I woke up. I finally woke up. My father looked around the room as if he no longer recognized his own family. Joaquin and Rose were quiet, but I saw in their eyes a new understanding, as if they too were seeing the situation for the first time. You'll regret this, my father said, his voice trembling. All of you will regret it when you discover how cruel the world is. The world can be cruel, I replied, but it can't be worse than living in a house where I'm not loved. At that moment, I heard a noise at the front door. It was Barbara, who had heard the shouting and came to interfere as always. Hi, everyone, she said, entering as if she were at home. I heard an argument and came to see if everything was okay. That was the last straw. Seeing that woman entering our house as if she owned it in front of my humiliated mother gave me a courage I didn't know I had. Ma'am, would you please leave our house? I said firmly to her. Excuse me? Barbara pretended not to understand. I said for you to leave. You weren't invited. Violet? My father tried to reprimand me, but I didn't stop. No, Dad, I've had enough. I've had enough of seeing this woman disrespecting our family, humiliating my mother, coming in here as if she owned the place. Barbara turned red. I don't disrespect anyone. Yes, you do. You destroyed our family. You interfered in my parents' marriage. And you still have the nerve to come here and meddle in our arguments. Your father and I are just friends. Friends? I laughed bitterly. Friends who have children together? The silence was total. Barbara turned white as a sheet. Everyone in this town knows that your son is my father's son. Everyone knows about your affair. The only one who pretended not to know was my mother. But now she also knows that she knows. Barbara looked at my father, expecting him to silence me, but he was in shock, without reaction. So now that everything is out in the open, I continued, you can take my father with you. You can make your affair official. That way my mother will be free to be happy. And I can go on with my life in peace. Violet, you can't talk like that. Barbara tried. Yes, I can. It's my house, my family, and you're an intruder here. My mother stood up and for the first time in years spoke directly to Barbara. She's right. You need to leave my house and not come back. Barbara looked around, looking for support, but found none. Even my father was silent, head down, defeated. You'll regret this, she said, trying to maintain her dignity as she headed for the door. The only thing I regret, I replied, is having stayed silent for so long. She left, slamming the door, and for the first time in years, our house was free from that poisonous woman's presence. My father was sitting in the chair, head in his hands, seeming to have aged 10 years in 1 hour. There, he said, without raising his head. You've destroyed everything. Are you happy now? Dad, I said with a calmness that surprised me. Who destroyed our family wasn't us. It was you with your choices. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like regret in his eyes. I always wanted the best for you, he murmured. No, Dad, you always wanted to control me. There's a difference. In the days that followed, I organized my move to Eastville. My Aunt Connie was happy to receive me and enrolled me in a school so I could finish high school. Andrew and I resumed our relationship, now openly with the support of my aunt. My mother also made a decision. She asked for a separation. It was a scandal in town, but she was determined. Better to live alone with dignity than accompanied and humiliated, she said. And that's how, my dears, at 17, I found the courage to change my life. It wasn't easy, it wasn't without pain, but it was necessary. Sometimes we need to face our fears and our prisons to discover who we really are. I married Andrew 2 years later. I became a teacher, as I dreamed. I had wonderful children who grew up in a home full of love and respect. My father lived his last years alone, bitter, without the family he had lost through his own choices. If you've stayed with me on this painful but liberating journey, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel, Grandparents' Tales. Your likes and subscriptions give me strength to continue sharing these real stories that touch our souls. because life teaches us that it's never too late to say enough to what hurts us. It's never too late to seek our happiness, never too late to discover our true worth. Thank you for listening, my dears. Until the next story.